All right. Thank you everyone for being here. Good evening. Hopefully you enjoyed the background music that we have coming or playing for you all this evening, as well as, and that your thoughts are being provoked by the images and the slideshow that we had playing for you all. Once again, greetings and thank you for being here. In a moment, you will see a small globe icon appear at the bottom of your screen. Please click on this globe to select your preferred language. We're happy to have the opportunity for this event to be in both English and in Spanish.
Bienvenidos los que prefieran escuchar la presentación en español. Momentáneamente aparecerá un icono de un globo al fondo de su pantalla. Clique sobre el globo y usted podrá escoger español, o si su pantalla está en inglés, era Spanish. Asimismo, si quisiera escoger inglés, se puede escuchar la presentación en inglés cliqueando inglés o sin oprimir el globo. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Once again, thank you all for attending our Why Menthol, Why Hookah, Why Now town hall meeting. My name is Nicole Turkson, and I am project coordinator with the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, also known as the AATCLC. The purpose of this event is to educate the residents of Santa Ana and the surrounding Orange County community about menthol and flavored hookah products, because these products are currently available in the community and pose a huge health risk to youth and people of color, especially as the COVID-19 pandemic continues. So tonight, we hope to empower you with knowledge and tools you can use to transform Santa Ana into a healthier community. So at this time, I will pass it to my wonderful co-host to introduce herself and go over a few housekeeping rules for this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Camille Cummings, and I am the project assistant with AATCLC. I work closely with Nicole Turkson. A few additional housekeeping items before we start. I do just want to reiterate that Spanish translation is available. So if you have not done so already, please go ahead and click the small globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select the language that you'd like to hear this program in. So you have the options of English or Spanish. We also ask that you remain muted during the program, but please know that during Q&A sessions, you will have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask questions to our panelists. In addition, the chat box is available if you'd like to ask questions and make comments during the presentation. Feel free to ask those questions in both English and Spanish. And lastly, we will be sharing tonight's agenda and additional resources in the chat box. And you'll have the opportunity to refer to the information there for information about the program, excuse me. And I will go ahead and pass it on to Nicole now, who will introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. I'll go ahead and move us right along and introduce Ernesta Wright, who is one of our co-hosts or co-sponsors of this evening's event. She is the founder of the Green Foundation and does wonderful work in the city of Santa Ana, as well as the entire state of California on these important issues. Over to you, Ernesta.
Great, good evening, everyone. And I'm delighted to have all of you join us this evening and for an evening of learning and sharing. And so I have the pleasure of being able to introduce our community voices to let everyone know the voices here in Orange County has been amplified for quite some time. And instead of us telling the story, we're going to let them tell the story. So I'm going to just name off in 2 to 3 minutes. They'll share with you. So the first one will start off with Betty Porter. Would you please unmute and tell us as a community voice in 2 or 3 minutes in your own words?
Good evening. I'm Betty Porter. I'm a cancer survivor for about 15 years now. My journey started with cancer in 1974 when my sister died, who was only 36 years old. And I was lucky and proud to meet Ernesto of the Green Foundation, because my other four sisters just couldn't believe that I hadn't caused cancer, and I had no support. So in stepped Ernesto that helped me with my doctor's appointments and visit me at the hospital for different treatment and everything. So I can't say enough, but I can say when I was first diagnosed, I did ask God, why me? And looked like the answer came back to me really clear. Why not you? So with my spiritual background, the journey began. Your life is never the same. You have a new normal life after cancer. And I was diagnosed in 2007, and I'm standing strong today because of my strong belief, the doctors, the Green Foundation, wonderful nurses, and I'm still standing. But I did question God, why me? But I believe I was selected because he knew I was strong enough to face the journey ahead. And the journey was difficult, but I made it. And I'm standing here today to say, I fight for health concerns all the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss Betty. And she is an advocate. She's an advocate for breast health, an advocate for others to be able to have access to service. And so we're going to go ahead and have Kimberly Howard from Johnson and Me, who has been a part of our tobacco education for quite some time. Kimberly, in 2 to 3 minutes, share with us today from your own voice.
2 to 3 minutes is so hard, Ernesto. Oh my gosh. I'm going to talk fast, okay? So hello, I'm First Lady Evangelist Kimberly Howard of Johnson Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Santa Ana, California. The church was established on first in Bristol about 89 years ago. We are celebrating our 89th church anniversary actually on the 27th of this month at 1 o'clock. So you're all welcome to attend. I want to thank you for letting me share what Johnson Chapel has been doing to help our community, our members in their health journey. I met Ernesto about 7 years ago when I first came to Orange County during our First Lady's Health Fair. And she has been a faithful participant every time we have events, and she's invited us to her Green Foundation events as well. When the pandemic hit, I had to discontinue the health fair and look for other ways to keep our Black community engaged in taking care of their health. And we, of course, had to close our church doors for over a year. During that time, we had online services, and in March and April of last year, we participated in vaccination clinics with other Orange County Black churches, and we've collaborated with the Orange County Susan G. Komen group and the Black cardiologists. And we recently, Ernesta had reached out to me and asked if Johnson Chapel would like to participate in the Act Now vaccination social media and community outreach project. And of course, we jumped at the opportunity. Since we are now having hybrid services, we have added the public service announcements provided by Ms. Wright to our Sunday morning worship slides that are seen by our online and in-person community. And we also post the PSAs to our Facebook page on a weekly basis. Our church services are uploaded to our 5th District Facebook page, which reaches as far east as Kansas, as far north as Alaska, and as far south as New Mexico. So we have about 100 views in any given week being seen for the public service announcements. Johnson Chapel is always willing to assist in promoting a healthy Black community, and I want to thank you for considering our church in your endeavors to moving forward our people to a healthy lifestyle. We will be promoting the Vote Yes initiative for the California versus Big Tobacco. And I want to thank you again for allowing me to share what Johnson Chapel has been doing and are doing in our community. And remember, come on the 27th at 1 o'clock.
Wonderful. Thank you, First Lady Howard, for joining us and being a part of our advocacy group and being a part of community to making sure information. So Alicia, you're going to have to speed it up a little bit to share as a community health advocate, as a staff member, and then please go ahead and introduce Shakia. And then the last remarks from Community Voice will come from Shakia Jackson.
Thank you, Ernesta. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Needham. I'm a community engagement advocate for the Green Foundation. I've been involved since 2018. And more recently, since I've joined in 2018, I've been always involved in tobacco work with Amplify and interacting, engaging with the community. And then with COVID-19, very much involved with community outreach, making sure we're distributing, keeping our community informed, making sure we're distributing PPE resources and stuff like that. And just really being able to connect with the community still, and still serving and hearing from people how important it is to get the PPE, to get those masks, those gloves, and how much they're in need of it has been really impactful. And just still being able to connect with people. It's been hard, but that's still such a joy and a treat, and I love being able to serve. So keep it short, keep it brief. I'm gonna now introduce Shakia Jackson of the Orange County Healthcare Agency, and she's also the lead of the Tobacco and Vape Free OC Coalition.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Shakia Jackson. I am a health educator with the Orange County Healthcare Agency Tobacco Use Prevention Program. And as Alicia mentioned, I am also the coordinator of the Tobacco and Vape Free OC Coalition. I've been involved with the Tobacco and Vape Free OC Coalition and the Orange County Healthcare Agency for about 3.5 years now. And currently with the Tobacco Use Prevention Program, that is the health department here in Orange County. And so we are working on various different initiatives throughout the county, including flavors work and multi-unit housing work in La Habra, as well as smoke-free outdoor recreational areas work, including smoke-free parks within Westminster, Cypress, and Garden Grove. And then within the Tobacco and Vape Free OC Coalition, we actually created small localized work groups to collaborate on tobacco control work within cities in which we saw heightened levels of tobacco use and tobacco-related health disparities and inequities. So we currently have work groups in Anaheim, Garden Grove, Santa Ana, as well as Westminster. So our priority as a coalition and as the Tobacco Use Prevention Program is to continue to engage the community around the importance of quitting tobacco use and especially trying to reduce youth access to tobacco. So even throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we've still been trying to push that message. We recently had a town hall last week for the city of Anaheim where we explored some research that has been released that showed the link between tobacco use and a potentially increased severity of COVID-19 symptoms if someone was to contract COVID-19. So we just continue to work together as a community and try to build the community's capacity in order to address tobacco use across Orange County and especially in Santa Ana. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Shakia, as well as Ernesta, Betty, Kimberly, and Alicia. We really appreciate you as our community partners, and we really appreciate the work that you do. It's really critical to our health and safety, so thank you. Next on our agenda, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Philip Gardner. Dr. Gardner is a public health activist, administrator, evaluator, and researcher. He recently retired from the Tobacco-Related Disease Research Program of the University of California, Office of the President, and will be giving us more insight about why menthol is a particularly dangerous product to allow in our communities. So without further ado, Dr. Gardner.
Thank you, Camille, and thanks everybody for coming out this evening. I deem it a pleasure to be able to talk to you. I think I'm going to be able to share my screen. Thank you. Let's make sure we can share the screen.
Yes. And then just a quick reminder, Dr. Phil, and to all of our speakers to come, for the sake of translation, if we could slow down just a touch.
I'm looking for my I found it. Folks see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So why menthol? Why now? Yes, I recently retired from the University of California, but my main work over the last decade has been fighting to get menthol out of the African American community as one of the co-chairs of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. I'm pleased to be here this evening to take this opportunity to have this discussion. The punchline here, why we're here, why we've been here for so long is that removing menthol from the marketplace, Black Lives Matter. Let's be clear that new research has shown that between 1980 and 2018, menthol cigarettes were responsible for 1.5 million new African-American smokers, 157,000 smoking-related premature deaths among African-Americans, and 1.5 million lives years lost among African-Americans. Indeed, this is the main killer. And if we want to kind of situate this whole situation, I would suggest that this is a framework for our time. Menthol cigarettes and flavored little cigars have been and are the main vectors of death and disease in the Black, brown, and other poor communities of color. The COVID-19 pandemic has just thrown a spotlight on the health disparities and unequal treatment that poor colored communities have faced for hundreds of years in the United States. At this time, nothing could be more helpful in saving Black lives and showing that Black lives matter than getting menthols, cigarettes, and flavored little cigars straight out of the Black community. I think was already mentioned earlier, the intersection of COVID-19 and smoking. Menthol just perpetuates that problem. I'm going to talk to you this evening about the African Americanization of menthol cigarettes, essentially 60 years of predatory marketing, and it's continuing as we speak. The tobacco industry assault on the African American community begins in the late 50s and early 60s. Brown and Williamson held a series of focus groups in 58 and 59 in 1960 and found that the advertising messages on television resonated more with Black watchers, viewers, than with white viewers, to the degree that they put 91% of their budget into television advertising. They began to use male actors with more Black features. People have to remember that this is in the midst of the civil rights movement, when folks can't even get jobs or sit at lunch counters or ride on buses. The tobacco industry tripled cigarette advertising in Ebony, one of the main magazines in the African American community. And then the tobacco industry began to use our idiom. Menthol's got a brand new bag, a la James Brown, Papa's got a brand new bag. Cool Jazz Festival and Cool Lexicon became standard fare in the Black community. And probably most problematic of all, as my colleague, Dr. Valerie Yerger, has pointed out, that many, if not most, Black civil, religious, cultural, political organizations take money from the tobacco industry. They have since the 1960s, and they continue today. If you take anything away from what I'm putting forward today is this slides, and these slides will be made available to all who are watching and listening to this. Keep in mind that in 1952, 1953, only 5% of African Americans smoked menthol cigarettes. By 1968, that had almost tripled to 14%. By 1976, it had tripled again. It had tripled again to 44%. By 2006, it had doubled to 82%. And today we find that 85% of African American adults and 93% of African American youth use mentholated tobacco products. Question is, where did this come from? This is an ad for Salem cigarettes in 1958. Salem just came on the market in in 1956. In 1958, here's your basic white couple in a meadow, Salem refreshes your taste. This was the message. But by 1963, you have Elston Howard, who is catcher of the New York Yankees now, promoting cool cigarettes, not only in print, as you see here, but on television. Keep in mind, 1963 is the March on Washington. 1963 is the Birmingham church bombing. We are in the midst of a fight for Black rights in the United States, and the tobacco industry is miles and miles ahead of this. They're already hiring Black actors to do this work. They're also hiring Black executives in North Carolina and Virginia to produce their products. By the late 1960s, early 70s, they take on the cultural images and idioms. Here we go. It's a brother with dashiki, beads, afro, a whole new bag of menthol smoking. Again, the bag that James Brown's reference. By the mid-1970s, alive with Newport pleasure. After all, if smoking isn't a pleasure, why bother? There's a brother in a suit and a tie, actually playing basketball. Excuse me. By the late 1970s, everybody's in the game. Winston's in, real, rich, and cool. But it's really the 1980s and the fight for market share where the menthol wars take off. We are talking about the tobacco industry knew the high traffic areas. They knew where parks where Black folks hung out. They knew the street corners, the daily routes. Everybody was in competition. Cool, Newport, Salem, Benson, and Hedges. Great article by my colleague, Dr. Yerger and Ruth Malone, Racialized Geography. This is not a made up thing. I lived in New York City in 1979, 1980, and even other times. I lived in Brooklyn and worked in Harlem, and I remember coming up out of the subway in the Harlem to go to work, and there was a van on the corner blaring African-American music and handing out free packs of cigarettes. Of course, at that point, I was a menthol smoker. I took my pack and went on to work. By the early 1990s, again, they're staying with our idiom. Now it's fired up. And notice it says Newport pleasure. When we look back 15 years before, it said alive with pleasure. By the early 90s, it was clear saying alive with cigarettes didn't fly anymore, and they had to change their marketing in terms of that. The tobacco industry is very cognizant of what they're doing. By the early 2000s, they're keeping, the game going with enticing. If you notice in the background, the silhouette of a woman is being shown. By 2004, again, remember it was cool jazz and then it was fired up. Now it's the hip hop, or what we know as the Cool Mix campaign of 2000 on. The DJ battle is on. Do you think they're aiming at a specific group of people? The Cool Mix campaign was a nationwide mixing and scratching and DJing campaign that was the culminating national contest in Chicago. Local opposition by African-American groups rose. Lawsuits brought by the attorney generals of New York, Massachusetts, and Illinois blocked the national meeting in Chicago. If you look on the screen, each image that you see was a pack of cigarettes that was being sold in 2003 and in 2004. This is from 2011. Why I'm doing this is the 50 years of pushing this product down our throat. Now it's just pleasure. Live with pleasure, then it was Newport pleasure, now it's just pleasure. Everybody knows what they're talking about. So let's stop for a minute and talk about menthol, what it is and what it does. I would suggest to you that menthol is the ultimate candy flavoring. At bottom, menthol helps the poison go down easier. Keep in mind that menthol is an anesthetic that masks the harsh taste of smoking, leads to cooling sensation, and increases throat grab. It actually mimics bronchial dilation, meaning that it makes it easier to inhale. The deeper you inhale, the more nicotine you take in, the more nicotine and toxins you take in, the more addicted you become. The more addicted you become, the harder it is to quit. This is why they put it in there. in the first place. Keep in mind that mentholated cigarette smoking inhibits nicotine metabolism. When nicotine enters your body and gets to your liver, it changes into cotinine, and cotinine is inhibited from being metabolized if it has menthol in it. Hence, menthol smokers keep nicotine in their bodies longer. We have data to support this. Another large set of words, independent sensory activation of neurotransmitters, the punchline being menthol smokers produce more nicotine receptors in their brains than people who don't smoke menthol cigarettes, meaning you have to feel more receptors. That's why you get more addicted. That's why it's harder to quit. There's the increase of salivary flow and transbuccal drug absorption, another group of large words where the punchline is if there's menthol in chewing tobacco, it crosses the gum barrier much more effectively than if there isn't menthol in there. And lastly, in this regard, and probably most problematically, is greater cell permeability, meaning that if there's menthol in the cigarette smoke, it penetrates cell walls much more effectively than cigarettes that don't have menthol in them. What's disturbing about all of this is that all tobacco products contain some menthol. What we've been talking about with Newports and Cools is these are the characterizing flavors, but regular cigarettes, Winston's and Marlboros, pipe tobacco, chewing tobacco. This is a tobacco industry slide from 1993. This isn't my slide. This is Hop presented this at a conference at the tobacco industry. A lot of people don't know this, that melanin is the substance that gives color to our skin. Nicotine, we come to find out, is stored in tissues that contain melanin. Punchline being is the darker your skin means the more nicotine is stored in your body. It's being stored in your body longer, it's slower to metabolize, it penetrates cells more efficiently, it allows for deeper inhalation, it produces more nicotine receptors. It's a setup. The tobacco industry knows this. This is why they put it in the cigarette in the first place. Menthols are harder to quit. As you can see from the slide, there are more quit attempts from people who use menthol, almost 10% more, but they're almost 15% less effective. That's because they are harder to quit. Word on the street a lot of times is you're not only trying to get off nicotine and cigarettes, you're trying to get off menthol too. Predation, the action of attacking or plundering where a predator, the tobacco industry, feeds on its prey, the African American community and other marginalized groups. There's a great slide from Latinisha Wright. She was part of the Cool Mix campaign in 2004 and was so appalled at what she had seen by the tobacco industry, took documents out of from the tobacco industry and shared them with the tobacco control movement. Punchline is the tobacco industry sees focus communities and non-focus communities. Focus communities are inner city, colored, and poor. Non-focus communities are upscale, suburban, rural, and white. And menthol cigarettes are cheaper in our community, and I'll show you some data on that. Predatory marketing patterns, an excellent study by Dr. Lisa Henriksen at Stanford that shows that as the percentage of African-American students increase, the proportion of menthol ads increase. There's a dose-response relationship. The tobacco industry knew this all the time. They're following where are Black people living, and they know that, then they create more advertising, smell more depth to our people in terms of this. Excellent study. That was California. This is storefront cigarette advertisers, difference by racial and ethnic community of two communities in Boston, Massachusetts. Brookline compared to Dorchester. Brookline, an upscale white community, Dorchester, a poor colored community. There were significantly more retail ads in Dorchester. The ads were significantly larger in Dorchester. The menthol ads were significantly more in Dorchester. And I guess what pisses me off the most is that cigarettes were nearly 50 cents cheaper per pack in Dorchester, making it easier to die from, essentially. One of my favorite slides is menthol, a sacrificial lamb. I would suggest to you that the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act that was enacted in 2009 was a deal with the devil. This was a compromise reached between Philip Morris, Southern senators, representatives of the tobacco control movement, even some members of the Congressional Black Caucus bought into this, where they all agreed to eliminate 13 flavors in cigarettes. But the only one they kept, they excluded menthol. Essentially, by excluding menthol, they threw African Americans, women, youth, Native Hawaiians, Filipinos, LGBTQ folks, Puerto Ricanos, folks with behavioral health issues, the homeless, numerous other groups, the marginalized, all were thrown under the bus. The fight to ban menthol takes off. Many of us fight this and testify before the FDA, Tobacco Product Scientific Advisory Committee in 2010 and 2011. Numerous scientific journal publications on harms of menthol are produced during that time, to the point that TPSAC comes out with a report that says, quote, the removal of menthol products from the marketplace would be beneficial to the public's health. Of course, the Office on Management and Budget didn't let this report out until 2013, but the FDA is known for over a decade now that it would be more healthy to get these products off the market. 18 months following that announcement, a number of people in the tobacco control movement signed what we call the citizen petition. The citizen petition, since that it had been 18 months, this is how infuriated we were a decade ago. It's been 18 months since you said it would save lives. Why haven't you gotten it off the market? And in fact, the FDA became of the lawsuit that we filed against them, which I'll speak about just in a second, is why they then responded to the citizen petition of 2013. Keep in mind that strengthening local restrictions are what's important, and that's what we're here today to support. The first ordinance was passed in Chicago in 2013 that put a 500-foot barrier around public schools. This was followed by a series of restrictions in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth in 2016 through 2018. They eliminated menthol, but they made exemptions that you could buy them in adult and liquor stores. But clearly, the San Francisco 2018 went citywide with no exemptions, and that's what we're calling on Santa Ana to do. All flavors, all places, all products, no exemptions. Today, over 70 jurisdictions around the country prohibit the sale of menthol and all flavored tobacco products. In June of 2020, the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council and Action on Smoking and Health sued the FDA for dragging their feet on this subject. We were joined later that year by the American Medical Association and the National Medical Association. The FDA finally acted last year on April 29th, 2021. The good is that they began the rulemaking process. They admitted that menthol as characterizing flavor should be removed from the marketplace. It included a rulemaking around flavored little cigars, and it mentions the importance of finding money for cessation. The bad is that we're still talking about no rule has been made public yet, and is not set to be made public until the latter part of April or the beginning of May. And probably what's most problematic is that the amendments and challenges will take years. If we can look at 2017, the last time the rulemaking process was started for menthol, the industry put in over 400,000 comments. This is not, I'm not making this up, this is the facts. They went to the judge and said, we need more than 60 days to comment. We need 90 days, we need 120 days. They got all of these things. It pushed it back and pushed it back. This is what will take place once the rule is put out. It will then go upstairs to the Office on Management and Budget. That will take a number of other months. It will finally come back and a final rule will be proposed. At that point, the tobacco industry will sue. We are a long way away. This is why the local areas have to take up and continue this fight. I know I'm getting toward the end, and let me just make a few important points. Don't believe the hype. There are a number of people out there, particularly within the Black community, who are funded by the tobacco industry, saying that ending the sale of menthol would be racist toward Black people, would criminalize Black people, and would raise an illicit market. I would suggest to you that's no to all those questions. Question you need to be posed is, who are the racists? The tobacco control advocates yourselves or the tobacco industry? Their claims that this would be racist for us to remove these cigarettes stands history on its head. There's more advertising in our communities, more promotions, menthol cigarettes are cheaper. Majority of African-American civic, educational, political, cultural, and religious groups take money from the industry. This is how these flavored death sticks became our cigarettes. They were pushed down our throats. Who promotes criminalization? The tobacco control advocates or the tobacco industry? Let's be clear that removing menthol cigarettes from the marketplace will not lead to people being arrested. All the ordinances that have been passed around the country talk about retail sales, manufacturing, and distribution. There's no laws about possession by individuals. Stop conflating police violence with public health reforms that will save Black lives. Yes, we need to stop police violence, definitely, but we also need to stop the sale of menthol cigarettes in our community to save lives. Enforcement should focus on the store owners, not on the store clerk, not on the individual who is probably a person of color, a woman, or a youngster. Focus where there needs to be focus. People say an illicit market will arise. As I've pointed out, 72 cities around the country have passed these laws. No illicit market has arisen. Canada prohibits the sale of menthol. No illicit market has arisen. The European Union has prohibited the sale of these products. No illicit market has risen. The only way the illicit market can arise is in North Carolina and Virginia, who produce them. And if we have laws that prevent that, then they won't arise. People talk about the unintended consequences, and this is where I began my presentation. What about the intended consequences? The intended consequences is that 1.5 million new African-American smokers, 150,000 smoking-related premature deaths, and 1.5 million years lives lost among African-Americans. That's the intended consequences. That's what the tobacco industry does. We can't wait on the state or the FDA. Lives are at stake. We must continue to fight for local and state bans on menthol. It's been 12 years since the passage of the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act in 2009. I would suggest to you that was the original sin. If it would have taken menthol off the market, by then hundreds of thousands of Black lives didn't have to die. Enough is enough. Take-home message. Menthol is a social justice issue. The disproportionate marketing and targeting of candy-flavored poison to African Americans and other specially oppressed sectors of society is outright discriminatory and genocidal. We're talking about the folks that are the poorest, the least informed, folks with the fewest resources, indeed the definition of preying on the most vulnerable sections of our society. If menthol were banned, hundreds of thousands of lives would be saved. One study shows that if only 30%, not 50, not 70%, but if just 30% of all menthol smokers, over 500,000 lives would be saved. 250,000 of them would be Black folks. So what's at stake? It's our future that's at stake. It's our children that are at stake. Here's young blood, saggy pants, backwards skateboard, and surrounded by tobacco imagery. This is what we're up against. This is what this fight is about. This is what I'm about. One little last note, and it's a perfect segue. Hookah, the fire next time, or is the fire right now? And I would stay tuned and hear from my colleague, Dr. Mo, who's going to talk to us about that. With this, I want to thank you. Again, I'm Dr. Philip Gardner, one of the co-chairs of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. And I will end my presentation there. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for that excellent presentation, Dr. Phil. I've heard it a number of times, but every time I hear it, it just re-emphasizes the point of why we're doing this. Punchline is flavored tobacco is a social justice issue. Menthol is a social justice issue. And our next speaker, Dr. Mohammed Farouzesh, is going to talk about how flavored hookah represents an emerging social justice issue that is impacting communities of color as well. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce Dr. Mohammed Farouzesh. Dr. Mohammed is a professor emeritus in public health in the Department of Health Science at California State University, Long Beach. This year marked his 35 years working in tobacco prevention and evaluation. He has worked with tobacco-free communities with Orange County Healthcare Agency for over 10 years, and he is known by his students as the Professor of Health and Happiness. So over to you, Dr. Farouzesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Would you allow me to start my PowerPoint presentation? I'll start it.
Go ahead, Dr. Mo, you can share your screen. Just look for the share screen icon.
Okay, let me get there. 1 second, and the slideshow. Share the screen. Share the screen. I am here. Okay. And let me get on the slideshow. Well, that's it. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Mo, and I just want to, first of all, thank the American, African-American Tobacco Control Leadership Council for inviting me to speak with you. I want to really thank Nicole Tuckerson for really doing a wonderful job at shepherding me all along the way to be here this evening with you. As she said, I will be speaking with you about let me see if I can go to the next slide. I will be speaking to you about the hookah as an apparatus for smoking. The hookah, I will be speaking to you about 3 other items. What is hookah, how it is used, talk about the myths that are associated with its use, especially in the Middle Eastern regions or population, as well as talking about the health hazards of hookah. It comes in different kinds of forms. This is a more decorative form that is used. People hold these items in their household. Hookah is a single multi-stemmed, often glass-based water pipe for smoking. The hookah has gained immense popularity, especially after the Afghanistan and Iraq war among American youth. I recall going to a Starbucks and seeing young people assembling these hookah outside, young people who were, you could see by their haircut, they have returned from Iraq or Afghanistan, being a military, and they use it very amongst themselves. Hookah is usually used in a group setting. It's not something you do as an individual. And you could see these people gathered together, and especially among young male. It's been surging more among female as well. And WHO, their research have talked about that this was really an old man's habit. However, since 90s, it's been kind of taking roots among a large number of young people in the United States as well as in Middle East. I want to address 3 items about hookah. One would be the tobacco itself, the charcoal that is used, the water, and misconception about the water, as well as the deep inhalation that are associated with hookah use. Usually they come in 6-pack. The tobacco comes in 6-pack. This tobacco is just like any other tobacco, is totally a high concentration of nicotine in them. And they lace all these packages with chemicals to keep them, and preservatives to keep them for a long period of time. The jar at the bottom of the hookah is often filled with water. Some establishments put wine fruit juice and other items to add more flavor and aroma to the smoking of the tobacco. And the tobacco is placed on top of these bowls, and the burning charcoal is placed on the tobacco. And some cover it with aluminum foil to separate the tobacco and the coal. When one inhales via the hose, air is pulled through the coal into the bowl, and the hot air from a charcoal roasts the tobacco, producing a huge amount of smoke. The smoke passes through the tube, which is then into the water in the jar. And Dr. Gardner said that the tobacco establishment are very smart. They try to produce a lot more smoke, a lot more bubble for young people. As you know, the alcohol companies also increase the carbonation in drinks because young people are very attracted to that. So therefore, these changes in the formula of tobacco is done in order to entice and bring more young people into the game. When a smoker inhales from the hose, thick smoke passes through the water into the person's lung. I just want to say that unlike smoking cigarettes that you take one puff at a time, hookah requires you to, in order to create the smoke, you have to take deep inhalation. Oftentimes, in order to increase the amount of smoke, they have triple or quadruple or 4 bowls on the top. This way you can enhance the amount of smoke that comes to the person who is using hookah. Hookah, most people believe that hookah has been part of the Middle Eastern culture for thousands of years. And many hookah advocates make that claim. Hookah has not been part of Middle Eastern culture for 1,000 years. Tobacco was very unfamiliar to European and the rest of the world before we discovered tobacco from the New World. Hookah was introduced to Ottoman Empire, which is the Turkish Empire in 1600, then became widely used around 17 and 1800. I just want to make one analogy here too, that during this time, the reason this apparatus was invented was because opium was used very widely in that region. And opium is also used as charcoal. So you often see that these two, opium use and hookah, are used simultaneously together in gathering of male in these regions. In recent years, of course, as I was combing the news, many establishments in Middle Eastern countries have banned use of hookah in restaurants, especially restaurants that serve food. And particularly, as you know, because of COVID infection, COVID virus, and sharing the mouthpiece have becoming a no-no. So even though they are promoting this in the United States, in the Middle East, they forbid the use of this in many establishments in the current time. And if you can go on YouTube and see many famous clergy, Islamic clergy, have declared that bringing harm to yourself, to your body, is against the religious practice. But you can see that the addiction or addiction to tobacco is so strong that definitely it's not being followed, even with the religious community opposing it. Some of them opposing it. According to WHO, about 100 million people use hookah on a daily basis, which represent a huge epidemic among young adults and young people. And this is, as I said, this epidemic is catching to the Western hemisphere as well. The misconception here is misperception is here is that 50% of youth believe that hookah is safer than regular tobacco. And advertisers obviously use this to promote the use of tobacco. While some argue that hookah is less harmful than cigarette, the truth is definitely not the case. Tobacco in hookah is not less toxic than cigarette. Hookah smokers actually inhale more tobacco because of massive volume of smoke that they inhale. And Dr. Gardner beautifully explained the effect of menthol flavor, and obviously menthol flavor anesthetizes your lung, thus you can allow more smoke to enter your lung and cause much further damage. Also, WHO have claimed that their research has shown that 1 hour of hookah smoking exposes the user to 100 to 200 times the volume of a smoke inhaled from a single cigarette. From 2011, 2015, there was a significant increase in hookah use among middle and high school age students. You could see that it's coming to the lower age group in our community. Today, flavored, what other thing is happening? They also use flavored instant hookah coals, meaning that lace the coal with flavors and with chemicals. And so therefore the coal would burn and get ready very quickly. This form of fast burning coal contains toxins and additives that could lead to carbon monoxide poisoning, and which is often called as hookah sickness. One of the biggest myths about hookah is that the water in the bowl is a filter, and it's being used as a filter that filters out the toxic chemicals. Researchers in our own neighborhood at UCI have conducted research, and they've actually proven that water actually promotes ultra-fine particle formation while you're using hookah. According to UCI study, the method of deep inhalation enables ultra-fine particles with a diameter smaller than 100 nanometers to enter deep into the lung tissue, causing irreversible damage. As Dr. Gardner said, they use menthol to anesthetize the lung. For those of you more familiar with medicine, you know that lung doesn't hurt. You don't feel pain in the lung unless you have lung cancer. So therefore, you could really do a lot of damage without you physically or biologically be aware of it. If, like, you put your finger on a fire, you know it's hot, but on the other hand, the lung would not be able to give you the same response. Hookah users may have a greater risk of developing COPD. You often see that after smoking an hour of hookah, they start wheezing. Periodontal diseases, coronary heart disease, lung, mouth, and bladder cancer are very, very common among hookah users. University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, compared with a single cigarette, they've proven that hookah session delivers approximately 125 times the smoke, 25 times the tar, and 2.5 times the nicotine, and 10 times the carbon monoxide into the bloodstream of the person. I am extremely surprised. I was looking at the Hispanic Latino tobacco-free California, which in their statistics, lung cancer is the leading causes of death among Hispanic Latino population. So I'm surprised Santa Ana, with the large number of Latino residents, they would actually entertain such a product in their community. Tobacco companies in Middle East often owned by the government, which is a huge source of revenue. I tried to do research in Iran, in other countries about tobacco, and they would not let me do research. Therefore, very little public education or research is done to mitigate and prohibit the use of tobacco products. I also did, Dr. Gardner would know, I worked with TRDRP, did extensive research with Cambodian community in Long Beach, and we did the extensive random design study with them. And I never forget the fact that they claim that when they use alcohol, they also use a lot more cigarettes. And so you could see there's a correlation between other products and tobacco as well. Tobacco companies often target vulnerable population. I am currently an evaluation consultant with the LGBTQ grant, that from the California Tobacco Control Office, and this is in San Diego and Orange County. And as Dr. Gardner mentioned, they try to target marginal population and minority population as well. I have evidence that I want to show you. When my daughter graduated from high school, the tobacco company sent us a present, and I still have a copy of it. The present was a pack of Camel that was sent to our house in 2002 when she graduated from high school. So you can get her first free pack of cigarettes when you graduate from high school. And I just let you know, last week, I also got an advertisement sent to my house that I can buy a pack of 12 cigars that cost $145 for only $29. So you could see the advertising, niche targeting, different audience and population is still going on in all communities, widely used in all communities, in all over community. Tobacco use for hookah often they mix them with molasses that gives a little sweet flavor. Any of you remember your grandfather that in their tobacco pouch, in order to keep tobacco moist, they put a small piece of potato or a small piece of apple in the tobacco pouch to keep tobacco moist. So traditionally, for many years, people use that method to keep the tobacco moist. But tobacco company turned that around, just like they did with yogurt and they did with soft drinks, they did it with other products. They laced it with chemicals and the artificial flavors. So to enhance the flavor, also make the tobacco to be less harsh to the user. Sugar and honey, as you know, they burn much faster and produce harmful smoke. So combining molasses, honey with the tobacco makes tobacco to burn very quickly and much with higher temperature that causes more damage to the lung. And especially when you use chemicals such as molasses, honey, or some people even soak the tobacco in alcohol, what would happen potentially increases the stickiness of the environment where carcinogen could adhere better to the lung tissues. As I said earlier, when you inhale, when you are smoking hookah, you're taking deep breaths. That means the lower lung parts, lower lobes of lung would be affected by the smoke. And most of the time when the smokers get cancer on the upper respiratory because the smoke doesn't infiltrate deeper in the lungs. So I just want to thank the council for inviting me to speak with you as a public health professionals. I would like to ask for your support for hookah to be included in a new law that ban flavor in tobacco and electronic cigarettes. And by eliminating all tobacco flavors, including menthol, it is expected that this policy change will be an effective preventive measure aimed at reducing hookah use among youth and communities of color. I want to thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak with you, and during question and answer, we'll cover the different topics and the different venues as well. Thank you so much and good evening.
Thank you so much for both of those presentations. I will just kind of reiterate what Nicole said earlier. Even though we are immersed in this work, hearing the facts and figures is always shocking and upsetting. So, thank you all for doing the hard work. Next, we're going to move into our question and answer segment. If you would like to ask a question out loud, go ahead and raise your hand and we will call on you. You are also welcome to type your questions into the chat box and we will read them aloud that way.
Yes, thank you again to everyone who's spoken so far. We're getting a lot of wonderful information this evening, and I hope people out there are really feeling the same way, that they are learning something new and that they're feeling a sense of urgency to speak up about this issue. I am taking a look at the chat to see if we have received any questions. Perhaps people are still typing them up. If you, as Camille said, would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and we can call on you to unmute. But to kind of kickstart this section, I'll go ahead and ask a question to our presenters. Critics of stronger tobacco ordinances claim that people have the right to use these products, regardless of their health impacts, and it should not be up to the government to tell people what to do. So basically saying if someone wants to kill themselves by using these products, that is their right. What would you say to these people?
That's an excellent point, Nicole. Let me first just thank Dr. Mo for an excellent presentation and the facts around smoking hookah. And I'm thinking back now, I was at the TRDRP when you did get the grant on the Cambodians in Long Beach. When you said that, you know, the little brain cells went off. Good to hear from you again. In all fairness, Nicole, let's look at people are required to wear seatbelts. It helps not only save their lives, it helps save other people's lives. People are required to wear helmets when wearing motorcycles. It not only saves their lives, it saves other people's lives. So it isn't solely about the individual, it's about the public's health. Similarly, the discussion, if you're smoking in a multi-unit facility, the smoke will creep into other places and affect other people. So this isn't a personal choice question. This is a public health question. So that's how I initially take up the answer to that question. And thank you for asking.
Thank you. Dr. Mo, do you have anything that
I just want to support Dr. Gardner's comment that public health tries to address population health rather than one-on-one or individual health. So in this respect, we will try to, as I said, educate, and that's why I think tobacco policies are very effective in trying to not only bring harm to the person who is a smoker, but also those around them. The hookah bars you go to, you can see the smoke is dispensed throughout the establishment. And anyone is in that establishment is affected by the smoke. So it's not just the smoker. Anyone who walk in the restaurants, and several establishments in Orange County, in city of Anaheim, other places are filled with the smoke if you ever cross them or pass by them. Oftentimes they put this establishment right adjacent to the restaurant or next to it. And you could see that definitely affects the whole public. And I also wanted to mention one more thing is that for young people to see an adult smoking is not a good role model. And that's why I love the picture that Dr. Gardner showed at the end of the young man sitting with all the advertising. So I think it's the environment and that we need to address, advertisement and targeting a particular population. You could see that tobacco is targeted to prisoners, to vulnerable population, to prisoners, to those who are in the rehabilitations or drug rehabs, all of those niche populations that are very vulnerable, who have other issues, they will target the tobacco to that population as well. So the tobacco companies move around. As I said, the advertisement I showed you is a typical example of trying to market this to communities as we're speaking to you today. I've been around tobacco for a long time. I remember they were marketing chewing tobacco to firefighters, and they're producing firefighting funds. They say they raise money for firefighters, encourage them to smoke smokeless tobacco because firefighters can be lighting up. So it's just amazing. I've seen everything in my life, and it just never amazes me how they find ways to get to you and continue the addiction population.
Thank you. And I actually have another question. So I have been hearing a lot of retailers who say that menthol sales really, drive their business, and banning those sales would potentially put them out of business. So what are your thoughts on that? And how do you encourage retailers who, excuse me, depend on the sale of menthol cigarettes to run their business?
A great question, Camille. Look, the punchline here is that, and we have data that shows this, yes, if you stop selling flavored tobacco products and menthol cigarettes and flavored little cigars, your revenues will go down somewhere in the neighborhood of between 15 and 25%. But you will not go out of business. Businesses are not going to close. I mean, the pandemic has had a greater impact on businesses than the laws that have been passed to restrict the sale of menthol products. I think secondly, and probably most importantly, these folks need to come up with a different business model. We don't need a business model that kills people to make profit on. Many people have even, I'll take your statement a step further, Camille, have put forward that, well, many of these corner stores and liquor stores and mom and pop shops are run by folks from who are immigrants themselves. Well, let's not have immigrants prey on people of color here, their own children and ourselves. It needs to be a new business model. Yes, they're going to be different. You are going to lose some money, but in the long run, maybe you can start selling more healthier products. Let's change the business model. Let's not just rely on killing people for sustaining life, your life, the retailer's life.
I'd like to make a comment about that. When City of Long Beach, from Cal State Long Beach, we promoted the non-smoking in restaurants. When that idea emerged that we would not allow smoking in restaurants, all we heard from Santa Monica, from Los Angeles to Long Beach, that a smoking restaurant going to take business away from us. People are refused to come to restaurants. I heard that for many, many years. In the contrary, the restaurant establishment increased the patrons, and they were able to. I have never heard the restaurant say, "I lost customer because I banned smoking in the restaurant." I remember we slowly start having designated areas, non-designated areas, but I will just guarantee you that this comment that yes, we're going to lose revenue, maybe you lose a little bit of revenue, but there's so many new products coming on the market, so many different drinks and so many different variety of products on the market for this establishment, that I'm not sure they're going to lose money. I heard that argument over and over. And now you can see that no restaurant claim today that I don't have enough customer because I don't allow my patron or customers to smoke cigarettes.
The same is right on point, Mo. The same is true. Bars said that they're going to close and they'll never be able to get customers back if you don't allow people to smoke in bars. People aren't allowed to smoke in bars, and the bar industry is doing just fine. So COVID is the one that's had the impact on the restaurant and the bar industry. But again, that's an excellent point, question that you folks asked.
Yes, and these are some excellent answers. I mean, Dr. Mo, what a great example. I don't even think I would want to go to a restaurant where they allowed smoking. I feel like I wouldn't be able to enjoy my food. And it's hard for us to imagine, in the past, people used to smoke on airplanes. People used to do all sorts of things. They used to be able to smoke almost anywhere. And we have taken steps to prioritize public health as it relates to tobacco control. And flavored tobacco is no different. It's just something that we won't be able to wrap our minds around until it happens. But I think we should really just believe and take a cue from the history that it's in our best interest to continue to regulate these products.
I want to call on all the folks.
The fact that there's a lot of
I want to call on the folks in Santa Ana to gather their strength and their energy to actually get menthol removed from the market, get flavors and menthol removed from the marketplace. I know it'll be a large push. It'll be a lot of pushback from retailers and pushback from big tobacco, pushback from all sorts of people. But if we put health first, if we put our children's health first, then I think we have a chance to do it. Again, I just want to thank particularly Nicole and Camille for hosting this and having us today. And I just noticed in the chat that Yaneth dropped some interesting stuff in there about Latino youth and Black Americans youth disproportionately using hookah. Yaneth, if you could speak to it, I know you can. It would be great if you could.
Yeah, great point.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. I was also trying to include this information in Spanish, and I did this very quickly. So, yeah, I just also wanted to just thank you, Dr. Mo, for sharing all the information about hookah. And I just wanted to share an experience, that I had a while back where I attended a high school party or high school graduation party and they were Mexican-American family. And they had a hookah in every single table. And I was just so shocked to see it. And my boyfriend at the time had to shut me up because I was, furious and I wanted to see it. But I wanted to share this experience because, hookah is becoming more popular in our communities. As Dr. Mo and Dr. Gardner mentioned in the Black community, but as well as in the Latino community. And the information that I shared in the chat is that there is one research article that shows that Latino youth who identify as LBG from the LGBT community are 60% more likely to use hookah than Latinos who don't identify as LBG. And also African-American youth and Latinos are also more likely to use hookah products than their white counterparts. And so just wanted to share some additional information that I think is important to mention. So thank you for allowing me or giving me the space to do that, Dr. Gardner.
Certainly.
And I saw in the chat, Tracy Wilkins asked, do we have time for one more question? Yes, we do. Tracy, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I do. Because for those of us who are advocating, especially towards youth prevention of smoking, my question then becomes if we can find an alternative or suggesting alternative, because a lot of times what I've heard from people who do smoke hookah or tobacco products or even marijuana, it's usually because they're it calms their nerves or decreases their anxiety. And usually those who come from a lower socioeconomic background do tend to have higher levels of stress for a variety of reasons. As someone mentioned in the chat, the LGBT community, a lot of youth, especially of LGBT, face homelessness, in a disproportionate amount in comparison to heteros. So instead of just saying, let's just cut tobacco use or banning it, for those of us who are advocating to younger populations, would there be a suggestion for an alternative, especially if you're trying to decrease your anxiety or your nerves or something like that? Is there something healthier or actually more appealing?
Excellent question, Tracy. In fact, that is the question when we deal with youth. If they've actually started smoking, whether it's hookah or flavored cigarettes, and then they become aware that or people like you are working with them. As my colleague, Dr. Valerie Yerger would like to point out, there are many ways to approach this, but one thing is to point out there's a stress relationship developing in the brain of the young person that they think that the hookah or the cigarette or the alcohol or the marijuana is going to solve. And they can be shown both scientifically and practically that that's not necessarily the case. So one thing is informing them about the stress response that they're having. The second thing that we've done, and I just want to applaud you for the question. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about, the tobacco industry already knows all this stuff. The stuff that Dr. Mo has talked about, that I've talked about, they're the ones who invented it. When you point out to people that the people who are selling you this are aware that it's killing you and addicting you, and they're doing it on purpose, often pisses them off, which is good. If they get pissed off about this, then they begin to be able to take some alternative measures about this. And then lastly, towards your point, we do need, and I want to strongly say this, we do need culturally appropriate, language specific cessation products, and when I say products, services available where people from their same background, who speak their same language, who look like them, work with them to get them off this product, off these products. So that's an excellent question, Tracy. Those are some of my responses to it.
If I just add a comment, it's, as you know, the younger you are, the harder it is to quit when you're an adult. This has been proven. And so what the question is that the children's brain receptors are being developed, millions of millions of them being grown on a daily basis by the time the brain reaches its maximum maturity by age 25. And so therefore, they're very vulnerable and the addiction is much more harder to give up. Well, on the other hand, as Tracy mentioned about, well, they're under stress. Well, there are hundreds of other methods of stress reduction exist and available to us besides the smoking. And so there are alternatives available for young people to adopt. The question is, why weren't we talking about them? As Dr. Gardner said, it should be culturally appropriate, the smoking cessation, linguistically and relevant to those individuals to be available to them. And I remember our first time when we offered the smoking cessation to the VA hospital next to Long Beach, and they paid each person $75 to enroll and to get everybody off the smoking. Yes, there are methods, incentives available for years and years on smoking cessation to be able to adopt it and use. An alternative method of stress reduction exists as well, and those should be practiced and promoted. I remember, I just give you a story. When I was in college, got my degree from University of Tennessee in South. I remember the Marlboro girls and Kent girls who come to campus, I remember coming to the parking lot on the east side of the campus and come to the campus and dispense tobacco to the individuals on campus to give it free to the students. Just like they do those energy drinks they give at the beaches. They come to the beach, give people free energy drink. They used to do that. So they have used these methods to just get you hooked. And when you're younger, you get hooked is much harder to quit. So I just think the excuse that, well, we're under stress, the smoking is going to reduce. Smoking does not reduce the stress. It increases your stress because you have to have cigarette every 20 minutes. Smoking is very hard. We even in researchers compare smoking with heroin addiction because your brain receptors are very sensitive to nicotine. So therefore, my hope is to stop people from initiating the smoking. But once they are engaged, there are multiple methods available for stress reduction and meditations and mindfulness and other methods available for them to quit. And we need to promote those methods simultaneously while we're trying to deal with tobacco, because tobacco is an addiction. Addiction is very hard, especially, as I said, you acquire it very young.
This is a great conversation that we're having. Cessation is definitely the other side of this coin. We have to further regulate the availability of flavored products in our communities. But the addiction remains even once the products are gone. So culturally competent cessation services are important. And I went ahead and dropped the link to Kick It California, which is a state-sponsored cessation resource that people can take advantage of. Share it with your community members, with your friends and family. They are trying to really do a better job of making their resources more culturally competent. And I know that different projects that are also funded by the state to work with minority communities, including the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council and Amplify, are putting together our own culturally competent curriculums, which we'll share with you in addition to other resources after the program. And I'm taking a look at the time. We're at 6:54. We're almost at the end of our time together. Thank you so much to everyone who's been with us so far. Thank you so much to our presenters. I know we had Councilwoman Mendoza on the call. I'm not sure if she's still here, but thank you, especially to our decision makers and community organizations in Santa Ana who took the time to join us this evening. So I would like to just say a couple of words as a call to action for what we've heard tonight. We've learned a lot about what big tobacco and hookah companies are doing in our communities. They're targeting African Americans, they're targeting Latinos, they're targeting LGBTQ youth, they're targeting all marginalized communities with their addictive menthol and flavored hookah products. And the fact is that this represents a social justice and health equity issue. Some steps are being taken at the state and federal level, as Dr. Phil mentioned and Dr. Mo mentioned in their presentations. However, local municipalities, cities, and counties can take these efforts a step further because the reality is menthol and hookah are being exempted often at the state and federal level. So this is at the hands of tobacco industry interference at the end of the day, because they don't want to lose their consumer base. That's the reality. So I would just challenge everyone on this call, including our decision makers, to imagine a world in which our grandparents, our parents, our aunts, our uncles didn't lose their lives prematurely to tobacco addiction. And imagine if our youth didn't become addicted because they grew up in neighborhoods where they were bombarded with tobacco advertisements for menthol, hookah, e-cigarettes, what have you, which enticed them to get their hands on these products while they're teenagers and even after they become of age and are legally allowed to buy these products. So what it boils down to is whether we'll put people over profits. So while the tobacco and hookah companies get richer from selling these products to us, are we going to allow our people to get sick from cancer and heart disease and COVID-19, as this is the new illness that is striking a lot of us? And we know that people who smoke and use tobacco are at higher risk of developing severe COVID-19. And, you know, worst case scenario, these people get sick and pass away prematurely, and then their family members are left behind and oftentimes continue the cycle of addiction. So I just want to say that Santa Ana is in a position to protect its residents. Santa Ana legislators can protect our youth and our communities of color by ending the sale of all flavored tobacco products without any exemptions. And we hope that they'll consider such ordinance at the council meeting next week on February 15th. And we encourage everyone on this call to attend and participate in the meeting by providing public comment, by reaching out to the council prior to that to talk to them and their staffers about this issue. The info packet that we shared in the chat contains more information and details on how you can do this. And we'll also be following up with an email after this call that contains much of the same information. So thank you all again for being here tonight, for listening to what we have to say. Santa Ana is a great city that's home to many people of color who deserve the same health benefits as everybody else in this country. And if I'll turn it over to anybody else who wants to make a closing statement. And then of course, thank our wonderful interpreter, Gabriel Veit, for being with us this evening and translating and making this, this program accessible to the large Spanish-speaking population in Santa Ana. We are recording, and we will make this recording available afterwards. So any final thoughts from anyone else? Perhaps Dr. Phil, you always have a powerful, powerful last word.
My initial thought was to really thank Ernesta for pulling the community folks together for this, and to thank Yaneth for providing the other side of the whole thing, of the Latino side of this. And you've already thanked the interpreter. Thank you, Dr. Mo. I know you have to get out of here for your wife's birthday. This actually went very well, and the discussion went very well. I want to thank you, Nicole and Camille, for doing this. And we will have to do this again.
Yes.
And I just want to thank you. Let me just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.